Welcome everyone to the third lecture of our Douglas Open Science training series, which is called Co-Designing the Future, Meaningful Inclusion of Lived Experience Partners in Mental Health Research. And I'm very excited to present our two speakers of the day, which are Chelsea and Tosh. Chelsea is a dedicated mental health advocate who strives to amplify the voices of those who are often misunderstood or struggle in silence. Her profound ability to deeply connect with others and meet them where they are in their journey arises from her own lived experience with borderline personality disorder. Currently, she is a lived experience coordinator at the Center of Excellence in Youth Mental Health and a master's student in counseling psychology at McGill University. She aspires to become a clinician-researcher to address the systemic barriers to accessing care and the unmet needs of youth. Tosh is a firm believer of stopping the stigma around mental health through having open discussions about it. As a lived experience coordinator at the Center of Excellence in Youth Mental Health, he strives to advocate for the youth and family council members in ensuring that their voices significantly influence mental health research while fostering community. Thank you both for being here today, and a warm applause, and let's go.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that great introduction. So we had initially prepared a little introduction about ourselves. So I guess quickly, just before jumping in, to give a little bit more detail, if interested, my passion for the inclusion of lived experience in youth mental health research. I feel like you guys can't see me. As it holds is really important to me, as it holds both personal and professional significance for me, given my lived experience with mental health, stigma, and the barriers I faced when accessing care. I understood the importance of amplifying youth voices in research and to ensure that the studies that we are conducting are relevant and impactful. That's a little bit about me.
Okay, yeah, just a bit more about me. So yeah, as was said, I really value inclusion and community engagement. So the way I approach this work is with the goal to really help others help themselves. When I was a teenager, I thought normalizing mental health was really important. And I was a part of a cool initiative called Stop the Stigma. It was a week where we planned mental health awareness campaigns and programs at our school. And we found guest speakers to talk about their mental health journeys. Which it was so cool to hear, and our students, I think, really liked that. So I'm just happy to know that like more initiatives like this are happening in schools these days. Like I talked to some youth, and they have Stop the Stigma programs. Like we've come so far in our discussion about mental health, and I think it's great. So I realized I wanted to keep working with youth in need and the surrounding mental health. So now being able to work at the Center of Excellence Youth Mental Health, and be at the forefront of youth mental health research, and being to facilitate the inclusion of youth in that has been a great opportunity. So I've really been happy to be doing this work.
So I guess to introduce a little bit about the Center of Excellence in Youth Mental Health. So to just guide us through our discussion, the mission of the CYMH is not only to focus on research, but to generate new knowledge, to not only focus on research to generate new knowledge, but on directly applying such knowledge in the delivery of youth mental health services, and provide training to a new generation of clinicians, researchers, and individuals with expertise by lived experience. This leads us into the vision of the CYMH, which is to empower every family touched by mental illness and to become champions of a brighter future for youth mental health.
Yeah, so the Center of Excellence Youth Mental Health, it really values and is committed to the meaningful inclusion of youth, really those youth with a living experience of mental health problems and their loved ones in co-designing research, practices, and policies. So to honor this commitment, the center had its first, we started our advisory councils in summer 2023. So the main function of our councils is to give a voice to people who have lived experience with a mental disorder, navigating the mental health care system, or who are just interested in questions related to mental health. So our councils meet about 6 to 12 times a year for about 1 to 2 hours per meeting. And the purpose of each meeting, it differs depending on the ongoing projects or requests of our collaborators. Typically workshops or research projects that are presented and our councils, they provide their opinions on proposed questions, areas, and issues. So despite having guiding questions for each meeting, they're a safe space for open dialogue, and teens, youth, and loved ones are encouraged to consider, to share like very important things that aren't really always discussed. So they're really encouraged to share their insight and have an open dialogue with what they go through. So open science. So a bit about open science. So yeah, open science is a set of principles and practices that aim to make scientific research from all fields accessible to everyone, for the benefits of science and society as a whole. So open science is about making sure that not only that scientific knowledge is accessible, but also that the production of that knowledge is inclusive, and sustainable. So opening tools and practices of the research life cycle to beyond the traditional scientific community is one of the cornerstones of open science. This concept is emphasized both in the international and Canadian open science landscapes. Open engagement of societal actors is one of the 4 pillars of UNESCO's 2021 recommendation on open science. So simultaneously, one of the objectives of open science initiatives in the Canadian federal government is to provide Canadians with greater accessibility to participate in scientific processes and research.
Okay. So within the field of research, strides are being made in lived experience framings of mental health and in understanding the roles of social context, injustice, and inequality in mental health. Several parts of the research landscape are already starting to embed lived experience within the research process. Examples of this include peer-led, user-led, and survivor research. And some funding agencies now even require people with lived experience to be integral to the study design, and community engagement is advocated in some ethics guidelines. The field is starting to move towards the inclusion of lived experience in research, with the Lancet Psychiatry requesting that authors provide details on whether and how people with lived experience were involved or led their research and studies. And if studies that don't mention without the inclusion of lived experience, we need to acknowledge this as a limitation. Overall, what we can conclude from this research is that whether it's any health condition, including mental health, we miss valuable sources of guidance when it doesn't include people with lived experience of the condition that we're studying. The expertise that comes from lived experience is as valid as that from the standpoints of those working in the field, caring for those, or even those researching that experience.
Okay, so some benefits of working with people with lived experience include improving the quality, relevance, and translation of research. It allows researchers to gain a deeper connection with the people whom their work aims to serve. It also helps set priorities to ensure that the needs of people with particular conditions are being met sufficiently. Okay.
Okay, so we know that there's the CIHR's Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research, or SPORE, which is a patient engagement framework that employs patients as an umbrella term that's inclusive of people with lived experience and their informal caregivers, such as family and friends. By extension, SPORE defines patient engagement in health as a meaningful and active collaboration in governance, priority setting, conducting research, and knowledge translation. SPORE acknowledges that in addition to the very important role of research participants, there needs to be a role for patients that allows them to contribute to research and research-related activities as a partner in the research process. And this is something that our councils have actually started to work towards and build. And so when there was this SPORE strategy refresh last year, our councils contributed to this refresh and sharing their ideas.
Yeah, so I'll talk about this more generally in more detail. We like to think there's 4 types of engagement. So so the first one is participation. So people with experience they're involved as research participants and subjects for a research project. So they're completing a survey, they're taking part in interviews, focus groups. Then there's consultation, which is more what our counselors are doing. So people with lived experience, they served as advisors and offer their feedback on a specific research project, intervention, or clinical service. So researchers then, they bring this feedback back to the decision-making table to determine how it might influence their activities, right? So this can look like joining an advisory council, providing feedback on project materials, things like that. Then there's partnership, which we really encourage people trying to do. So it's really people with lived experience are equal partners and collaborators with the research team. And they're leading project activities. So they're sitting on a steering committee. They're contributing to decision making on priorities and project methodology and supporting leading project activities. Then finally, there's lived experience partner led. So really led by the lived experience partners or youth. So they're really taking the lead with the projects by themselves or with the support from a senior researcher, right? So they're really doing all the work. They're applying for the research funding. They're doing research, REB, right? Research ethics approval. They're identifying and training project staff, and they're conducting all the research activities from initiation to completion. So that's what we really like to have happen, is have more youth led, have more projects led by people with lived experience. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we talked about including people with lived experience and the different types of level of engagement. And so there is some principles or guiding frameworks that we like to think about when including lived experience in co-designing research. And I just want to mention this is simply to provide guidance and isn't an exhaustive list, as every research project is different and has different needs. But ultimately, the first one would be to recognize people with lived experience as colleagues and value their input and expertise as you would another member of your team. Ensuring that lived experience is embedded in the whole research process, from design to implementation and even dissemination. It should be central to the functioning of the project. If possible, also involve diverse groups of people with lived experience. Having as many perspectives and experiences as possible helps for the best relevance and a more holistic picture. Compensation is equally as important. So it's important that offering compensation to people with lived experience for any of their contribution to the project. And it's important to factor in these costs in your funding proposal, your grant proposals, your budgets, so that they're part of the whole project of the whole part of the research project. And we also encourage you to be flexible and allow different ways for people with lived experience to contribute in a way that works for them. So what might work for one partner doesn't necessarily work for another partner. And so we must be flexible and allow for this adaptability in working with people with lived experience. In addition to these principles, it's key to remember that we shouldn't be asking people with lived experience to divulge or open up about their stories or give details about their journey. We want to ensure we're empowering them to use their voice and to leave it up to them to share if they wish. This gives them the power of sharing their story when they feel most comfortable and whether they want to even at all. By empowering them, we can provide them with the opportunities to share their insights on topics that they're passionate about.
So yeah, just going back into really compensation. So no matter what level of engagement as agreed upon, people with lived experience, they must receive fair and transparent compensation. This is really important. It's essential to offer a clear set of principles and expectations on payment and expenses. So this information should be provided at the upfront before the actual involvement starts. So compensation should be based on an hourly rate that reflects their level of expertise and training, as well as the intensity of the participation. So sport support units suggest an hourly rate of $22.82 to $50 an hour, depending on the role, responsibilities, and experience and training of the patient partner, lived experience partner, and member of the public. So again, this should be included when starting the budget and deciding whether to work with people with lived experience in your project.
So moving to specifically youth engagement in research. And so we thought it would be cool to talk about some of the benefits of youth engagement in research, specifically from the perspective of youth. So as we discussed earlier, it's becoming increasingly important to engage youth in the research area of mental health. If your research is surrounding youth mental health, including or consulting youth in your projects can be beneficial and an important aspect to consider. So we just discussed a few principles on engaging with youth. So here are a few benefits that are implied for the youth. Youth struggling with mental health issues often feel shame and feel alone dealing with their struggles. So being part of a community, such as an advisory council, gives the youth with lived experience a sense that their experience and insights are validated and valued. It makes that making a difference, that they feel like they're making a difference by sharing even a slight portion of their story, by having an impact on research, can give them a sense of purpose. It also empowers their voices that are often unrepresented or marginalized, and those of young teenagers who are experiencing these difficulties, who often feel left out of the conversation. It sort of empowers them to give them this voice and sense of community. By including youth in research, we can also foster skill development within our youth. These skills include leadership, public speaking, advocacy skills, and ultimately allow them to gain a deeper understanding of the research process as a whole, and also gives them a greater and more detailed knowledge of the resources that are available to support them. Finally, by engaging youth in research, it can equip them to be lifelong advocates and contributors to mental health advancements, perhaps even a career in academia, or career paths in mental health professions or policymaking. So for myself, as an example, my personal lived experience inspired to not only heal, but also to contribute to the field of mental health research, because it once had an impact on me. For the researchers, for research, how can youth engagement be a benefit to the research process? It ensures that studies address the most pressing needs and priorities of the generation that they're targeting. By embedding youth perspectives into research design, data interpretation, and dissemination, these initiatives enhance the relevance, accessibility, and cultural competence of mental health solutions. It can also bridge the gap between young people and researchers, as well as policymakers. These relationships can yield ripple effects, such as improved public health initiatives, enhanced service delivery, and even more robust mental health education in communities.
Okay, so when engaging with young people, it can be daunting if you've never done it before. So when we meaningfully want to include youth in the research process, there are a few things to remember. So first, it's okay not to have a clear idea what partnership looks like at first. There's no singular formula for involving them in research. There's many different models that do exist. And young people's roles can evolve over time. It's important to be flexible and fluid with roles that they can take on during the project. However, it's also important to make adaptable roles that reflect their skills, their schedule, and that can be changed over time. So being fluid, that refers to youth transitioning between different roles in a project. Because it enables their expertise to be acknowledged in multiple ways. So for example, a youth may join a research project with specific roles that were designed at the beginning of the project plan, but later on in the project, they might have the opportunity to contribute in another way, to show their lived experience in other capacities or activities. So to be fluid with interchanging roles, super important. Another way to really help this process is to create a relationship with community organizations. That can really help get the word out about your study and build a bond with the community that your project aims to support, right? So when you're starting out and you're thinking about recruiting or involving youth, partnering with these organizations can really help facilitate youth involvement. So if possible, it's so beneficial to work with organizations that already have these relationships with the youth, because then you're coming into an already trusted relationship. So it's important to try and take time to find different communities who share your goals and values of your project, right? And to foster meaningful relationships with them. This can take time, for sure, to make really great lasting partnerships, but the benefits go such a long way. So I really encourage that. Go ahead.
So now we'll move into some best practices when engaging with youth. So it's really important that, since our youth partners are younger and teenagers in some cases, it may seem like there might be a power imbalance, which is what we want to avoid. There's no one way to do this, as every project is different. But a way to ensure a good power balance throughout the project from the start to the finish is to have open conversations between youth and researchers on what this relationship can look like. This includes being approachable. A lot of youth emphasize that the importance of researchers coming across like normal people rather than professors who are just there to get information, allows them to be much more approachable in a way that they actually want to work with the youth, and it's not this sort of notion of tokenism to just get information from our youth. So this may also look like being youth friendly by being approachable, warm, and kind when conversing with youth, while also maintaining professionalism and creating an informal space where youth feel comfortable. This leads into another best practice, which is to cultivate a safe environment which promotes feelings of safety that are needed to feel comfortable with others in a group to openly share your personal experience, which are oftentimes challenging and emotional to do. So we allow the choice not to share if they don't feel comfortable, and also don't make them feel judged if they don't wish to share. When we cultivate a safe environment, we also encourage to foster a sense of community. Fostering relationships between young people and the researchers will ensure better engagement and progress across the project. This relationship building among young people is vital for creating a safe, supportive space where they feel comfortable sharing their experiences without judgment. Understanding and respect on the part of the researcher fosters this sense of safety and sharing, fosters a sense of safety and ultimately cultivates the sense of community and enables open communication of often sensitive topics.
So yeah, we've discussed the importance of creating a space where everyone can learn from one another, fostering a successful and well-grounded research project. So one key way of doing this is by establishing opportunities for both giving and receiving feedback with youth and the researchers. So whether that's at the beginning or throughout the project or at the end, creating a really good feedback loop can really, help youth and researchers, help everyone reflect on the partnership and recognize what's working well, things that can be improved, and ensure that everyone feels included at their chosen level of involvement. So this could look like a brief survey after every meeting or every few meetings, or even having some dedicated time for some open discussions to reflect about how things are going, give and receive feedback. Super important. I think it's best to do this ongoing to really make sure everyone is comfortable in the role. So just always make a space where you can give feedback and receive it. I think both ways go a long way for sure.
This brings us into one final aspect to consider when engaging youth with lived experience in research, which is to consider having a project ally. To ensure quality engagement, youth can benefit from the support of a project ally. Having a lived experience coordinator like myself and Tosh, a youth navigator, or a community worker where their job is to facilitate this collaboration can help and bridge the gap between them and the researcher. This person should have experience working with people with lived experience, working with youth, and may already have a relationship with some of the youth that are involved in these committees. This is a position that can be held by a lived experience partner that is already hired on a research team, which brings us into the discussion of what our roles of Tosh and I are as lived experience coordinators. And so personally, I'm in a really unique position where I have personal lived experience that I'm comfortable and have the knowledge of sharing in a safe way, along with the research background that allows me to bridge the gap between research and the inclusion of lived experience. And Tosh brings a more community-focused role to our collaboration. And the main role of our job is to really connect youth that have youth and loved ones that have lived experience with either research teams. We've even collaborated with clinical teams and project teams who really want to make sure that their projects are informed from the ground up with the people that it actually has an impact on. And so typically teenagers and youth may not have a research background or any research knowledge at all, and not necessarily even know how to engage with that power imbalance that we're talking about. So that's really what Tosh and I do, is ensure that there's this liaison sort of between the researchers and the youth, and sort of, like we were talking about, have a relationship of trust that already exists. So by extension, if the youth trust us, if we trust the researcher, then the youth will have already this sense of trust that, okay, the lived experience coordinators have our best interests at heart, and so they'll bring a project or a researcher who also has our best interests at heart. And finally, we want to make sure that we amplify the voices of our advisory councils and their impact on research. What this looks like personally in the role of Tosh and I is ensuring that whatever is discussed at our advisory council meetings is further implicated in whether it was providing feedback on a funding proposal. I review the funding proposal from start to finish to ensure that all the feedback that was given is accurately and equally implied in the funding proposal, to make sure that there's no one piece that gets left out, because their voice is equally as important. And that leaves us to facilitating our advisory meetings that we coordinate, and we ensure that they have a safe space to feel comfortable and express themselves in a way that is safe for them and engaging for them. And so that's a little bit about what Tosh and I do as lived experience coordinators.
Okay, so we'll talk about the councils in a bit more detail here. So to bring it back, so let's focus on discussing our councils at the center. So at the center, the inclusion of lived experience voices is really at the forefront of what we do. So our councils have been and are fundamental to the fabric of our center, and they not only inform on the research projects, but they also ensure that our space is youth friendly and down to the wallpaper in the T Pavilion. So no matter how important it is to talk about our councils, tokenism, again, is something we really aim to stay away from. And what's truly incredible is the work that they have been involved in and the impact that they have. So really, our experience with our councils has been super great. They're super happy to be involved and to be part of the solution to help others. It's been a great initiative so far.
And so a little summary of what our councils have been up to over the last year and a half is, first and foremost, which is why they were the inception of them happened, was the Bloom research program that was started. So our lived experience councils really informed every single part of Bloom, down to the recruitment. So the councils were involved in creating leaflets and posters for recruitment. They tested our questionnaires and the platforms that we were using for the study. They also provided feedback on workshops that we were hoping to offer to participants. And then as well, one youth partner met with the research team regularly to work on ensuring that our demographic questions were sensitive to every experience, and that they were present. This youth partner was also present for all interviews when hiring the research assistants for the study. Finally, they also contributed to projects with clinical teams and project teams within the CS. So that would be the Quebec Program for Mental Disorders and First Line Access. With these meetings, they met on multiple occasions to ensure that the services that were being offered were youth-friendly. And then as well, they also had an impact in a lot of other youth mental health research. So that is, there was a project with Massey on including the loved ones in his proposal, and ensuring that his proposal was about physical health and mental health and how there's the overlap between the two. We also had recently, Malar came to talk about climate change anxiety. That was something that was really interesting for the youth. And we also have an active collaboration with ACBEF to ensure that their services are also youth-friendly and consistently adapted and promoted with the youth that they serve in mind.
Okay, so in the late fall of last year, we conducted an evaluation and focus group with our council. So this is a part of our initiative to really get proper feedback about how we're going. So some key themes that emerged are, so their feedback really, for our collaborators. They really said to really be clear with the goals of the project and what's expected of the council members. They said this many times. I think all councils said this. If our collaborators could provide some sample questions beforehand, so they have time to look them over, so they can come with their answers already ready. Give definitions. So for our collaborators, if there's any terms they might think, or scientific language, jargon that maybe the average lay person or youth might understand. Just provide some definitions. That could be in your presentation, or that could be like a little sheet that's given so the youth can follow along, just to make sure that they're up to date with certain things that they might not know what they mean. And I think the more we do that, the more they will learn, right? So the first few times, give a few definitions. The third time you meet with them, they're going to know what these things mean, right? So they've all said, yeah, please give us some definitions if you don't know. So yeah, have an engaging visual presentation. So all our youth have said they can follow along way better when our collaborators have a presentation. It's engaging, youth-friendly, colors, all that stuff. It helps them really focus a lot more. So we always make sure that they come with a PowerPoint presentation if that's possible. One youth really said to have our collaborators explain why the project matters to you, to really humanize, So after introducing the project, the goals, really talk about why it matters, why they want to be like involved, what's the impact. And I think that goes a long way to have the youth feel connected to the project. So talk about why it matters to them and what's really the impact of the research that you're doing. Explain how the involvement of the councils will be mutually beneficial. So in the past, I think there's been some collaborators who are like, oh yeah, like your insight is super, super beneficial to us, really, getting you guys to co-design it with us, make it more relevant, right? But also tell them how it will be, what benefits does it give to them, to the youth, to the loved ones, right? How can they learn? What can they bring back to their communities, their families, right? So really talk about how this collaboration is mutually beneficial for both parties. And to be shown their impact on the research. So even if it's just an update every 2-3 months or something, and that's super important. We know with research, getting results takes a long time. Getting funding, right? Research projects can take a long time. But some of our youth and our loved ones have been like, hey, so what's up with that project that we met with? I'm not sure, how my voice has been used for the impact, right? So really giving any little update, hey, here's where we're at, here's what the study's at. Thank you so much for your inclusion. Really kind of bridges that gap and makes sure that connection's still alive. So any update, even like a little info letter every couple months, here's where our study's at. Thank you to your input. So that goes a really long way. Yeah.
Okay, so now to sort of end our presentation on a research note, I guess, is future directions. So as we met with our councils to evaluate them, we also got some ideas of what they were looking for to sort of bring our councils to the next level. And so one of that is to provide them trainings to further their knowledge. So a lot of them said they didn't have any basic research knowledge training. So if we could provide them with some sort of like basic knowledge on research. Another training that they offered was like if we could have an active listening sort of training on how to be a better like peer support worker themselves. And then we also they also mentioned that they were interested in providing having opportunities to speak at conferences, and so this gives them a platform to share their voice on an even grander scale. And that's something that like also providing them training with how to engage in these sort of settings. So having that liaison where somebody's there to help facilitate their presentation, their participation in these conferences. And then they also mentioned how it would be super cool to engage with other advisory councils, whether that's locally or globally. And so we know that there's some that exist in Australia and Birmingham, and so maybe seeing if there's a potential to collaborate with them and further the conversation on the inclusion of lived experience in research. And then finally, one of our goals is that, and what they had mentioned as well, is that by the end of 2025, we would have a project plan that is youth-led. So having a project that's completely led by our youth from the ground up. It could start as a very small idea. One of our youth has proposed a podcast series that could be hosted by our council. That could even just be like a start for them that they were very interested in. And a way that we could also facilitate this is providing an opportunity for them to be trained on how to even host a podcast and engage in knowledge dissemination. And so providing them with each step and not forgetting that they're not as versed in the community that we are in research, so they may not even know how to vocalize or verbalize the research that they know or the research that they contribute. So giving them this training from the ground up. And finally, this takes us to where we're headed next to share our knowledge a little bit. So we'll be attending the 7th International Conference for Youth Mental Health, where we'll be actually talking about our youth councils and the work that they've been up to over the last year and a half, their implications in Bloom, and hopefully future directions to collaborate with other councils that will be present at the conference as well. Yeah, good. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, this is how to meet with our councils. So these are the links, so that's on our webpage, our Youth and Family Council webpage on our website, talks more about what they've been up to, how it works, kind of stuff that we talked about. And then there's a link for our meeting request form. So it's pretty much just the way that our collaborators can talk about what they want out of our councils, their research project. They can also contact us directly. This is just another way they can get through us. But if they have our contact or any liaison, contact us directly. Be really clear about what you expect of our councils, how you want to collaborate with them, and we'll meet with you and we'll get it going. So yeah, these are some links that I guess people online can look at. Or anyway, it's on our website. So. Yeah, it's fun. Oh, any questions?
Thank you both so much.
Thank you
for this presentation. Yeah, this is the question period.
Yeah.
I was just
Anything.
wondering if there's a mic I can forward here. This one?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great. That should work. Ready? Go.
Is it working? No.
Screen.
Is it working?
We can hear you back.
You can
there.
hear me, so
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But on Zoom, they may not.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Aarti, and I work partly at PEP. I work partly with the Youth Mental Health Collective up there at Perry. And first off, thank you so much for sharing, using the open science platform for bringing this up, because it's absolutely essential that research should be shaped by those who will be beneficiaries of the outcome of that research, whether that is in the context of health or any other sphere, whether it's education, schooling, physical health, mental health. And I'm currently involved in 2-3 projects which are focused on youth involvement in research, and it's been a very, very fascinating journey for me to also move away from the traditional, patients as subjects,
Yeah.
participants
Yeah.
from whom data is collected, to those who actually inform how research should proceed. 2-3 things really, I think that resonated with me. It's really not a question, but one is about compensation.
Mhm.
I think it is very essential that now, of course, it's documented how much compensation or honoraria should be paid. And similarly, even for our indigenous partners from indigenous communities, there are certain criteria of how much how they should be compensated, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. So that's very, very essential, because the kind of expertise young people or even older people with lived experience bring, I don't think it can only come from academic research or clinical experience.
Mhm.
I was curious as to how in your work you've been able to address the question of power
Mhm.
balance,
Mhm.
because when young people come in as whether it's as a part of advisory council or co-designers, co-producers, co-researchers, when they first come in, they may that it's typically somebody who's a professor, who's a PI. Everybody else on the research team has some research background. So how have you, if you didn't have any research experience at all, and then now you've entered the sphere of research, how did you negotiate it in your own research journeys?
Mhm. Yeah, well, I'll say first, like I think that's really our job, just to make sure when we meet with our collaborators that they know, hey, like there may be some power imbalances here. So just have that in mind. Be approachable, as we said, like really treat them, like really make sure that they're welcome there and their expertise is really valued, right? They should be treated as experts, you know? So I mean it's been working. Like we make sure that when we meet with our collaborators beforehand, and when they come in, they really want to make sure everyone feels comfortable, and we're there to help facilitate it too, right? So they might feel a little bit awkward to speak right away, on the youth, right? That's why they look to us. Can I speak? They raise their hands. Of course, go ahead. So we're there to make it. So I think just being clear and transparent from the beginning. Hey, like we're all here. We're all trying to learn from each other, right? And I think the earlier you kind of set that tone, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what helps too is that we're somewhat of a youth age as well. And so there's this like relatable aspect where they can like, where I can like relate to what they're saying and they can relate to what I'm saying. And then when more like jargony topics like research you come up, they feel comfortable to be like, red lights blaring, I don't understand. And then exactly. And then we can take that's what we're there for. So then we ask guiding questions to the presenter or the researcher or the collaborator to help facilitate a more basic level of knowledge. And so to really, I don't want to say dumb down, but to like bring it on their playing field, basically like use vocabulary that's familiar to youth and to teens that they use in their everyday language. And that's something that one of our collaborators actually came into. Was she was preparing a knowledge translation piece where it was a video for young children and teenagers, and she was like breaking down the language like word for word in French, like what do teens and youth use right now as the language to like express these ideas, because it's so important to get your point across in a language that's relatable to them. And then the way that I kind of use the research knowledge that I have in terms of like having done research in the past, I'm able to ask these questions that really bring bring it back to the basics, right? Because researchers can be really up in their head about the topic, right? And so they're really deep in the knowledge, and having no experience in their research project, we're able to really take it down to the basics and see how our use can have the biggest impact in their research. I hope that answered your question. Perfect.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, because I had a question exactly in that domain. So thank you so much for the question and the answers. I was just wondering if you have any resources, because when I think about my own research, I'm for sure in my head about it, and there's like all these terms I think about. And do you have any suggestions of, even before the first meeting, where to start in terms of breaking that knowledge down? Are there any resources for researchers for that you have?
And I don't think that's not something Tosh and I have done in the past, because it's really like done in the moment very naturally.
Okay.
But this brings us a good idea to like have these resources available for like the collaborators that come in to help like.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that our next talk will be actually by Bonnie on knowledge mobilization. So we'll have some resources on how to communicate with the lay public and so on.
Well, that's perfect then. But thank you so much. Are there any other questions here?
Hi guys, great job. And we're from the same group, and I see you guys working super hard on this domain. And I'm more research oriented. I don't really know what goes into it before today, but this is really important work, especially with the framework that you're proposing in the conference. I'm looking forward to looking at that. But I think I have a more open-ended question, because it feels like, yes, it's super important to have a framework to tell people what to do from your experience. But I guess I'm curious, what's your personal experience on the challenges that you face, the key challenges that you face in having this kind of position? Because I imagine more of this kind of position is going to open up in all the research center, and that's the goal. But what are your experience on the challenges that you faced? And I guess how that would apply to the longer term of this kind of framework. And yeah.
I guess like, so just to reiterate the question to make sure I understand, like basically what we face as challenges in our roles as lived experience coordinators and what kind of engaging youth with. Here. Okay. Okay, great. So I think I could only speak on my behalf, but a personal challenge that I often find myself facing is when collaborators want to meet with us and we're asking, asking ourselves, is this really worth the time and energy of our youth? So that's something that Tosh and I reflect on a lot, because sometimes we were talking about those levels of engagement, and sometimes if it's really at a low level of engagement, that's not worth, maybe not worth, I'm using the word worth, but I'm using, I want to imply more that's like worth their time and energy, because they do take 2 hours out of their day to give to us, and out of some of the challenges that they face, it could be an emotionally charged time to be in the space. And so we do a lot of self-reflection, Tosh and I, about like, is this request worth their time and energy? And so we try to balance like what the collaborators need and how the youth can have a maximum engagement and implication with the request of the researcher. So that's a personal challenge that I think we've faced in the past, is really like reflecting and talking together about like how we can make sure that this is the most engaging possible for youth. And so that's why we did an evaluation with them, to really like understand what they want and how we can best present it to them to make it worth their while, I guess. And then another personal, like what I can talk about in terms of another challenge I've experienced is, and that Tosh has really helped with, is like, I also have a research background. So sometimes I can get up in my head with some of the abbreviations. So like it happened in one presentation where there was a researcher that was using an abbreviation I knew, but that the youth didn't know. So then there was this time where I was like, we have to, spell out what the abbreviation is. And so going back down to the basics, to being like, okay, this is what it is. Because like I said, like when you're so deep in the knowledge of research, it's hard to like remove yourself from it. So having the both of us there really helps to like step out from that space and like make sure that we're coming from a youth friendly space too.
Yeah, I'll just say like, yeah, I think that's exactly like what we try to do, like with our evaluation, to really like see what's going well, what's not going well. It helps so much. I remember this one of our youth who said, yeah, this project, that project, I didn't really take much from it. So we're like, oh, okay. And he was the one who's like, yeah, maybe you should bring some definitions, or maybe you should send the questions next time so we can be a bit more, right? There's certain collaborators where it was very smooth, and certain where it just maybe felt kind of flat, kind of dry, right? So that's really important to always, ask for feedback, what's going well, what's not going well, so we can, really tell the collaborators what to bring beforehand to make sure there is no barrier, or the engagement's not really quite there. So that's what I'll say. Yeah, it's all about just asking questions and really getting that feedback. It goes such a long way. But I think like the more we do it, they will be more versed. They're going to learn. They're here to learn, right? So really making sure that it's a learning opportunity for them too. And yeah, just making sure that it's a good fit. As Chelsea said, like maybe this project not really a good fit for our teens, but our youth, oh yeah, they're going to love it. Or like no, not for the youth, but the loved ones, they can really engage with that kind of topic, right? So I think making sure that's a good fit, that's something we really make sure we try to do. So that's how we, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Bonnie. I didn't know you were here. Okay. Thank you for everything that you mentioned. It's very, very interesting and important to include all of these voices. I personally coordinate an alliance for mental health research, and we have a much smaller group, but we have 4 patient partners who work together, and we plan on having a conference in May that's very complementary to yours, and that it's going to be, now that everybody's convinced that patient partners and engagement in general is very important, we're going to be describing tangible actions, actionable steps that researchers can take at every step of their research projects to involve people in a fruitful way. And I invite you all to this presentation. I think it's going to be beneficial. And yeah, of course. And it's going to be given by the patient partners themselves. And so I think it's a unique way to bring together both of our initiatives. So thank you.
Feel free to reach out to Tosh or myself, and we'd be happy to.
We've already spoken
Yes, I am.
months ago,
Yeah,
but
familiar
we
face.
weren't there yet. We're catching up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I guess I'm just wondering about kind of like the protection for the councils. So, like, dealing with youth and discussing topics of mental health, things could come up that, like, might be upsetting for some. And so, if, for example, someone says something that really upsets another person, are there resources? Is there like a licensed clinician kind of on site that they have access to?
So, sorry. So I want to say that that hasn't happened yet, because we really foster a space where they're not forced to talk about something they're uncomfortable with. And so when we meet with researchers, that's the first thing we tell them is you don't ask for a part of their story or a part of their experience. They inform what they feel comfortable with. And so by starting that as the baseline where they don't have this pressure to feel like they need to share a very detailed part of their story, you're not lending to an experience that might be triggering per se, right? But it does happen where youth share their story. I want to say that a large part of what Tosh and I do is ensure that it is a safe space. So we meet with council members before they join the youth council or the teen council to ensure that they have a general idea of how the councils work, but also to like feel out if they would be a good fit for what we already like have as a council, because we really want this sense of community to continue. And in terms of like having a clinician, we don't have that per se like available to them right away, but we do have a list of resources that we could send in a moment of crisis. And I have training in like active listening and like crisis management a little bit, and I'm studying to be a psychologist, so eventually I'll get there. But for now, it hasn't happened, but it's always a safe space. And one thing that we didn't necessarily talk about in the presentation is that we have this like unique relationship with our council members where they do feel very like we're very approachable, right? Because we want to be that liaison between the, let's say, researcher who's coming in versus them, and so they feel comfortable sharing with us. And it is a like, I want to say like a professional friendship of sorts. Like it's not friends. There's a professional boundary, but we're able to check in and be like, oh, how's school going? Like, like making sure that they feel supported in their involvement in the council, but also we care about them and we care about their well-being. And if there's a time, for example, where the youth, let's say, missed a couple of meetings, I'll reach out and I'll be like, hey, like, how have you been doing? Is everything okay? Is everything going okay? If you need to chat about something, like Tosh and I, are you here for that? If you don't feel comfortable, that's totally okay. We don't need a reason. There's sometimes that youth don't answer us, and we don't take that personally. That's their involvement is completely up to them and completely their decision on when they want to come to a meeting versus not, or if at all. I don't know if that kind of answered your question. Cool. Did you want to add anything? Okay.
I do have one more question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Just for me, like I do molecular biology, and so I'm kind of thinking like I can see how you can implement this council easily and like clinical psychology, epidemiology, like different fields. But for me, I'm kind of thinking like I don't really see how I could implement this in my work personally. So do you have any examples of like maybe like molecular work or genetics or anything where you've kind of had councils involved?
There was Karina Nagy.
Okay, yeah.
Who does that similar kind of work, and she hasn't met with our councils yet, but we did talk about how that can happen. And just kind of like at that point, it's really just seeing what the youth think about it. Maybe they can't give too much of their insight they don't know, but I think just having them involved and getting their opinions, even just on a basis level, could be a start, or it could be a chance where you could at first give a bit of education on the work you do. Because if it does involve youth, I think it's important to include them in some kind of way. But I think, yeah, baby steps, I think. So hopefully we will meet up with Karina and have that meeting. And we'll see how that kind of goes with those kind of topics.
So I'm also thinking, like, I don't know the specific area of your research, but like I can relate because my best friend did research in molecular biology, but she focused on like a specific protein in cancer research. And I can imagine having like a patient partner who has cancer inform some of her research in terms of like, because ultimately your research will inform a grander picture of things, right? So having them inform this like implication at a further level, not maybe the nitty gritty of it, but further down the line on the impact and the implications of your research, I guess.
And our youth have a bit more knowledge about research than our teens. Our teens are really there because they show an interest in mental health. Our older youth have been through the system a bit more. They've been in other research projects. So maybe for younger teens, it'll be a little harder. But for older people, lived experience that have been through the system, that have been in research projects, that could be, maybe you can get a bit more from them. Also, our loved ones. There's many of them more peer support workers who have also been in research, right? So it's really finding like the best fit, right? So there might be one youth or one council that has a bit more knowledge that can give better insight than others, right? So, but yeah.
And I think there's some questions on Zoom.
Oh yes, there it is.
So related to the last question, there's someone on Zoom asking about how do you draw the line between staying professional but also building a bond of trust with youth?
Yeah, that was an interesting one because you said we kind of act as like, friends, but we have to kind of create that boundary as well. So we do check in on them, like we do, but at the same time there is a boundary. So say it's the weekend, they message me, I won't get back to them until Monday. Certain things like that. And yeah, it's.
And also, like,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
In terms of like maintaining that, there's a way to be kind, warm, and approachable in a way that also manages the expectation that you're not their therapist, you're not there to be their like crisis interventionist. There's that kind of like boundary in a way that, and it's a professional boundary. We've always maintained that if you're in a crisis, if you need to talk about something a little bit more that you're struggling with, that there's resources out there, that's not necessarily Tosh and I's job per se, but rather to make sure that their engagement in the council is what we can facilitate best, not outside. I don't know if that answers the question online.
Yeah. Also, I'll add like, yeah, so like we want to make the space, youth friendly for our teens. We order pizza, we get like pop, make it fun for them, right? We have breaks from the talk, but they also know that, sometimes we're doing quite serious topics. And I think just being open with the youth too, with the teens. Hey guys, we're talking about this. Like, we need to be a little bit serious about this, but also we'll have time for fun after, right? Making that balance of like we're doing real work, but at the same time, they enjoy being there, right? So I think just being transparent with the youth too about our boundaries and about the boundaries in the research and about our expectations of them and them of us, right? So that's why I say give and receive feedback. I know some of our teens were like, hey, tell us how we should be better too. Tell us if we should be more focused, less, right? So things like that. But also creating a safe space, have some food, make it nice, make it enjoyable. So it's that kind of balance. Yeah. Thanks.
Kind of a follow-up question to what you just said. Since the youth are engaged in terms of like consultations, so in order to make the projects happen, they're wondering if there are any changes that the researchers can make to use that.
Okay. So any changes, wait, I'm trying to understand. So any changes that researchers can do for youth-led projects?
To facilitate youth-led projects, because
Okay.
right now it's just consultation.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I would say is to facilitate a youth-led project, I would say it has to be done by youth for youth. And so if you have a researcher who, for example, like I can imagine the way I could talk on like, well, how I imagine it going for us is that Tosh and I would meet with our youth, see what they're interested in, and then use our knowledge of what they're interested in to bring this to like the PI that we work with to see how we can further take the project to basically just have them support it, but it's really led by youth who maybe are in the field of research as well. So having that facilitation between like a youth who has lived experience and a youth who has research experience, I guess. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but that's how I envision it going.
Yeah, I'll say like also start small too. So there's consultation, then the next step is partnership. So have them be on the team, have them co-design, have them on a steering committee, give them roles. There's many roles that they can take where they're actually partners. That's what we're trying to do too with our youth councils, have them more involved in our center, right? As we said, they can evolve, so they can engage with other youth. They can do conferences, they can do, right, many other things to get them involved more as partners. So once they're more, then youth-led. Right. So small steps, get them more involved slowly, partnership, then youth led. Right. So that's what I'll say.
One last question about collaboration with you guys. They're wondering if it's only available to the Douglas investigators or also the broader McGill community or even broader, like internationalized.
Yeah, it's not limited to the Douglas
Yeah.
at all. We've had people from the like really like distant like healthcare fields that consulted with our youth. They were like interested in how to better improve access for youth to health services, non-mental health related health services. Like it was like to go get a vaccine, like how can we be more youth friendly in like that approach. So it's really like any project, anyone. Again, Tosh and I meet with you to ensure it's a good fit and how we can best support like the collaborator to ensure that it fits with our councils. But yeah.
Yeah, we have certain expectations, there's compensation. If we're on the same page, then that's fine. But yeah, we will meet with you to see if it's a good fit, make sure that all our expectations are met, and then anyone can come meet with our councils for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Then, given the time, I would suggest that we move this discussion towards the pizza. So thank you, everyone who was here in person and on Zoom. And of course, the biggest thank you to Chelsea and Tosh for this amazing presentation. A huge applause.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, guys.
And then I'm going to say goodbye to everyone on Zoom.